Yo, my peoples, what's up? My name is Jason, and I'm from the Shelf Stories YouTube channel, and I'm here in the Dice Tower today to review One Small Step. This one is a game designed by James Dumont and published by Academy Games. Academy Games known for their educational, historical games, but also real gamers games, entertaining as they can make it. And this one has a theme and a setting that I love, the space race. So let me go ahead and show you how it plays. Without further ado, let's go to the videotape. This is a 2-player or 4-player worker placement game. 2 players head-to-head, I think that's the ideal, but you don't also play team versus team with 4 players. But what you are getting here is a worker placement game based on the space race. We're talking mid-20th century. The Americans and the Russians are racing into space. The Soviets have just launched Sputnik, and the war is on. Who is going to be the first to land on the moon? So you're going to be gathering resources. You're going to be placing your workers over here. You're going to be using these cards. You see Yuri Gagarin over here and Alan Shepard over here. You have a lot of historical integration, historical flavor in these games. If anybody knows me, you know I love me my history in my games, especially if it's not a war game. This is a classic Euro-style worker placement game. What you see in front of you is the Russian board. There are 2 boards, the Americans and the Russians. I have shown you, here's the hammer and sickle right there. Just want to isolate that. There's a lot going on to this game. There's a lot going on in the explanation of this game. Anybody who is going to be teaching this game is going to be in for a bit of a time. However, I think beginning with the player boards is instructive because it's kind of the beating heart of what players are going to be doing from turn to turn. So then, this is a mission card, and this is really how you progress the game. You'll be launching missions at the end of every round, turn by turn, converting things into things, right? So then on the left-hand side over here is going to be where you're inputting, and then on the right-hand side is going to be on the reward. End of every round, you are going to pay whatever those resources are. And there are a lot of different resources in this game. There are 9 total resources that come from 3 different families. You have agency resources, so like personnel and money and equipment. You have satellite resources, so parts for the satellite. And then crew resources, most important, things that will keep the astronauts alive while they're in space. So at the beginning, it says artificial satellites. So obviously, it's going to take some satellite parts. You're going to try to complete the top row at least. So then, if you don't complete the top row, you're cooked. But if you do, you would simply spend 1 resource, in this case, fire, and you would get these rewards. And I don't have to explain all the rewards, but it's all good stuff. You can also complete the secondary reward. So if you wanted to pay this resource, which I think I usually call it stoplight in my games, but I think the book calls it a sensor. I would pay another resource, and I would complete that as a secondary objective and get even more stuff. So really the heart of the game, gather the resources that you need in order to complete these missions, get the stuff, move on to the next turn. There's also another layer of resources. So if you notice that there are these black resources up here, the white circle ones, they go away, they're temporary. For this resource, it's permanent. You would flip it instead of discarding one, and then it refreshes at the end of the turn. And there are ways to kind of acquire more of these, trade things out. This game is very resource flexible. But again, the whole point of the game is to complete these missions. So I'm going to show you how you get the stuff to complete the missions. All right, so I have returned to the board, and this is a section of the board where a lot of the primary action is going to take place. This is the beginner overlay. There is an advanced side that I'm going to show you in just a minute. So each side is going to have 4 workers of 2 different types, so 2 and 2. This is the engineer, and this is the administrator. So then, depending on which type of piece you put on one of the 6 spots, you're going to be able to do a different thing. So if I put an administrator over here, and you see the little icon over here, engineer, you'll be able to execute the top action in the space. In this case, it's take 2 temporary resources, turn them into a permanent resource, very good space. Or if I wanted to put the administrator here, that's the administrator symbol. They would do the bottom action, which is gain 4 media, which is a very good action of itself. I'll show you media in just a second. Point being that once I have a piece on there, no one else can put a piece here. It's not like I can kind of activate this space later, or my opponent can activate this space. One space, one use. So that's the earth actions that you can do. So this is the second area in which you can place workers. These are cards, and they are going to come round by round from this deck. So you see the number 1 is up here, era 2, era 3. As you go through the game, they're going to get more and more powerful spaces, and they all pretty much look the same. So they're multi-use in the sense that in different phases, they're going to act differently. In the main phase of the game, the worker placement phase, you can basically do this and just look at the bottom and then activate them depending on what they're doing. So then I'm going to take my administrator piece, there's the American piece, put it here, match that, and get that reward, and then I'm good. Let's say the Russians wanted to jump in and they want to take advantage of these spaces. It would look at the engineer space, they would put it here, and then get whatever that resource is. At the end of the worker placement round, what's going to happen is each faction that put a worker on a card is going to receive that card, and they're going to be able to use that card in another phase. So that's where you would actually pay attention to the top of the card. So let's say they're in the worker placement phase, I got the benefit of this, but then in the next phase, I would be able to play cards, pay this cost in resource, get that, and this is also happens to be a victory point. So in this way, this game does have multi-use cards. You have to be a little bit careful because the cards behave differently based on phase, not necessarily how you play them. All right, so let me show you the rest of the game. As you proceed, you are going to be acquiring these tokens, and they're double-sided depending on if the Americans or the Russians get them. And you are going to be moving along the lunar path over here. So let's say the American earned a point. They would be the first ones to get one of these chips. There's usually a victory point under this, and then the Russians would be catching up, and then they'd be just kind of moving along, taking these away. And then the first person that is able to land here is going to trigger the end game. You would count up the points along this outer track over here, and that's how you win the game. These are the decks where a lot of the cards are going to come from. I showed you the event deck. A lot of your missions are going to come from here. Each character also has a personal mission deck, and this is what you're going to use, the personal missions that go. So if you notice over here, you see this little moon space over here. That is exactly the symbol as you complete the mission that is going to progress your game towards the end state. You also have tokens over here. These are these little satellite tokens, just rewards for finishing different missions. They have all sorts of powers. You get a lot of stuff in this game, and it comes out randomly. Also, before I showed you those globe icons, that's media. So media also adds a little bit of slack and variability in the game as the characters get media. Once you get to this place, you are going to get a token, and just like the satellite tokens, they have all sorts of effects. You will be able to use those when you get them or save them for later for some big kind of no return. But this is going to be going back and forth, back and forth. Popularity, not so popular. Kind of jockeying back and forth, which is the US versus USSR dynamic that the game is going for. You also have these, which are hazard cards. They can get played. This is kind of the main interaction, direct interaction that the game has. It's not like a passive worker placement game where you're just kind of calmly placing workers. No, you can screw up other people's missions by putting them on the crew cards, and you kind of play them, and then surprise, once they launch, some malfunction is going to happen. Last thing I'm going to show you is what the advanced game adds. So I've taken away the beginner overlay, and I've put on a kind of a sea of more complicated seeming spaces, and they are a little bit more complex. They do a little bit more, some different things. Eventually, you are going to be able to acquire these tokens, which will unlock an upgraded action. So you will be able to, let's say on this action over here, you do that familiar turn 2 temporary resource into a permanent. You go here, and then you could do it again. So this is going to be one of the things that you can do as part of your launch. improve the spaces, and mold your game because you're going to have a certain strat. Maybe you're going for events. Maybe you're going for different areas. So you're going to want to mold the worker spaces to conform to your strategy. Last thing I'm going to point out are these advancement cards. Add a little bit more variety, a little bit more spice to the game. You're going to run through these pretty from game to game. You'll see the same cards, but this one you'll be able to really mold your strat if you add these into the advanced game. So you'll get a card like this, Hard Worker. You may spend a personal resource to use both actions on Earth space. Woohoo! So you can really mix up your strat by including the advancement cards in your advanced games. So that was one small step at the table, and let me get to the star of the show, which is the theme and the theme integration. Fabulous. Oh my God. If I was just rating this game on theme, it would be a 9 out of 10 or higher. I'm a historical buff. Y'all know that. The space race is an underutilized theme. It's just like exciting to think about and fantastical. Two great superpowers marshaling all their resources to launch up into space, this imaginative area. Who's going to get to the moon first? Fabulous. Oh my goodness. And the art style and the production and the rule book has a lot of kind of extra flavor if it's there, if you want to read it. But if you don't want to read it, the game does a good job of creating a vibe for me and for anyone who is at all interested in that motif of the space race. This game is so inviting. It's excellent on that level. So then, we go for the mechanisms. We are talking about games, not an art piece. So it's pretty good, right? And there's a couple of things that I really like that this game does. When it gets to a worker placement game, especially a head-to-head one like this one, and I think this is a 2-player game. The box is 2 to 4, but I just feel like there's not enough there for a strategic gamer to get their hands on. Like if you're collaborative, like if it's like team versus team, like you can play Codenames Duet team by team, any dueling game, people can kind of like form teams and that's cool. But I think in terms of a real kind of get down to the nitty gritty strategy game, it's a heads up, 2v2, 1v1. That's kind of how I enjoy this game. So what I want is I want to be able to build. I want to build an engine. I want to build stuff. It's worker placement. It's not just this competitive thing where I'm just going back and forth. But I do want that, clash and interaction somehow. So does that game manage to achieve that balance? I think it does for the most part. You are building. You can, build, especially the astronauts, they stick around, they generate resources, so you can kind of build an engine, feed them little bits of resources. The astronauts spit out better resources that let you launch your good cards, and that's very satisfying to put together. There are different ways to play, different strategies. It isn't just like, get a resource, or, do a thing. A lot of worker placements game can be kind of like straightforward and boring that way. This one is a little bit more sizzle than that. Different ways to play. Want to go astronaut heavy? Do you want to go event card heavy? Do you want to just kind of be attacky and get going that way? That's all available to you. That's pretty cool. You do see all the cards, like, in a one playthrough, you'll see basically all the cards that the game has to offer, which is why you get those advancement cards in there, and that flavors up things enough, creates that replayability through that advancement deck, because now that changes up your strat and the way you approach it. So I thought that the game did a good job of having a stable set of resources, but, a river of just a little bit of change to add replayability. Very well done. And, the head-to-head, the crowded spaces, it's a kind of a crowded game. Not a lot of spaces not a lot of places to go. Some of the spaces you might not need. Some of the spaces, sometimes you really need it. And 2 people are going for the same one space. That's cool. Worker placement, I want to be able to kind of get in the other person's way. This game does a lot to do that. Very good. So having said all that good stuff, I did have 2 main difficulties with this game. And it comes in 2 different buckets. So the first one is, it's not an easy game to learn. So you saw that worker placement area, the Earth spaces, and you'd never know it was just 6 spaces. I mean, there's a top and a bottom to each space, and then there's all those icons. We're talking 10, 12, 14, whatever it is, a lot of icons for just those 6 spaces. So you have to explain a lot of that if you're kind of either learning it or teaching it for the first time. And this was a little bit rougher for me, the cards. So I love multi-use cards, but the idea that like when they're on the board, they become worker placement spots on the bottom half of them cards, and then you acquire them into your hand and use them in a later phase, but you use them for the top half, its top half. Kind of brilliant, and I like the innovation once I got it. Once I got it, and like any rules barrier, you once you kind of overcome the barrier and you kind of like really sink into the game, then it's not so bad. But just learning it presented a little bit of a difficulty. Individually, they weren't so bad, but kind of additively, it created a lot of load. At least I experienced it, and the people with whom I played it and taught it to. So that's not so bad, right? It's like, you know, a game presents you with a lot to squeeze and you have to like really squeeze it out. So then you're expecting juice on the other side. Is the juice worth the squeeze? It depends. I really do think that it depends. So that gets me to the second area of concern that I have, which is that there's a fair amount of randomness that gets shot into the system as you are doing the usual worker placement, build your engine type stuff. So in that way, it reminded me a lot of viticulture. So viticulture, excellent game. People like it, but I think a lot of the main struggle that people have with viticulture is that those season cards just kind of like add an element of randomness that can, you know, you're working and you're making your engine, but all of a sudden, your opponent gets a card that they truly need. Wow, I can finally, you know, speed through whatever I'm doing and, you know, just get that. And it didn't even do anything for it. They just drew it off a card. Here, there's the dice for the resources, which is a thing in and of itself. But I think for me, most of the randoms came from the satellite tokens, which are just random rewards, and also the media track. Ooh, that media track. So I showed it in an overview. It's that blue track that's right on the top right hand of the board. And it is, you know, it's very easy to go up. I thought it'd be harder, to be honest with you. You know, because you're earning media, right? But there's a lot of ways to earn media, and once you get to 5, you know, you can reset your track. You get a token. Functions basically the same as a season card in viticulture, where it's like a thing that you get. It's like, wow, I got this, and it could be mediocre, not really resonant with what's going on, just kind of nice, or it could just completely open something up for you where you're wondering if you could launch a card. Now you get a media token or something else, and now you could not only launch a card, you could do it with the second launch, that bonus launch, and get like a whole pile of rewards because of a bit of randomness that kind of floated your way. And that created a difficulty on a number of levels. Thematically, and I'm not everybody cares about theme, but I do, so I'm talking to the people who care about theme. I can't imagine a NASA scientist or the NASA organization just, oh, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to ask, you know, whoever for some benefits. Now, I don't know what they're going to give me. Wow, thank you very much for giving me this random thing. I'm going to work with it. That's a little bit, doesn't jibe with how I think of a science game. That's what, at the end of the day, this game is emulating science. It's not a fiction setting. And there was also a part where this isn't the media track. This is one of the astronauts. So one of the astronauts that's constant power, and every turn you could pull from the media deck. And if you have the resources to finish the mission, then you just launch it, and there it is. And it's like, what random, you know, crew member is just off just doing experiments on their own, and they come back to the bosses and they say, hey, I launched my own rocket, check this out. And the boss is like, sure, that's great, we're gonna throw it into the pile of the other rockets. Ooh, that was it made the game feel sillier and feel looser than maybe I wanted it to. So that's on a thematic list, number one. But then on a strategic end, like I said, will your strategy pay off? Like in viticulture, you do need good strat, but the best player won't always win. I don't think so. Won't always win. You might get that one, like, you know, and maybe the designer didn't want that. Maybe they, you know, sometimes you don't want the best player to win. Sometimes you want that other, you know, a lot of other people to play and feel like they have a chance to win. The best player win most of the time, but not always. And, you know, the best player with the best strategy might not, they might fall to somebody who just got a lucky series of media tiles. That's probably baked into the design. You probably, more people can play, more people can feel like they can have fun and win and all that kind of thing. But that experience is cool, but it doesn't jive with the fact that this is a very difficult, I found it a very difficult, very kind of crunchy fiddly rule set. So then crunchy fiddly rule set, game where different players can win, maybe based on input randomness. Oh, a little bit of a mismatch there for me. So that's not so bad if you like the theme. And I adore the theme. So that's where I'm going to land. Because of this theme, because of the solid game in and of itself. And, once you get past the rule barrier, it is a fun game, does some cool things with the worker placement, competitive worker placement, the multi-use cards, but in a wonky, weird way that once you learn it is cool. All that comes together for me. We're going to go 7.5 seal of approval. It might not be for everybody. It might not be your fun, especially if you want a more stable system of worker placement to go with that sciencey theme, or if you just want to be able to, go get into that solid middleweight of a worker placement game. This is a little bit below that, but whatever is your fun. I hope that I've laid out what this game is so that you can make a decision for yourself. So please visit my channel. Shelf Stories. Shelf Stories is where I expound upon the videos that I have on the Dice Tower. I do stuff that's above the table, editorial style, so history and culture and mental health. I may even do a history chat about this time period, just as a companion piece to this game. I'm not as familiar with it, so it might take me a little while, but that's the kind of thing that I do on Shelf Stories. So this is Jason reminding you, if you could change your mind, you could change the world. So until next time, later everybody.